Hi, happy to have you join me today. We're going to talk about how to use questions, but more importantly, how to use questions effectively when we're teaching. So we're all used to using questions, but sometimes it does make a difference the question we use. So first, let's talk about the reasons we use questions. And I'm sure there's more reasons in this, but this is what I could come up with. Um, the first reason is to create a personal environment. We also ask questions so that we can increase our students' talk time and decrease the teacher's talk time. Of course, we also want to encourage peer interactions and create an active learning environment. And also, probably one of the most important things that we do by asking questions is we can assess and build on the student's understanding. So we're going to look at these areas and how we can ask questions more effectively to reach these goals. Let's start with increasing the student talk time. And you'll notice that actually by doing so, helps us with two of our other goals. So when we increase our students' talk time, we get them to share what's important to them, thus providing that personal environment. So we don't know what's personal to our students until we ask. So by getting them to speak rather than speaking for them, we can understand their questions, their concerns, and their stories. It also allows students to teach one another. So when we ask questions, we can get more interaction, and we'll go over that in just a minute. It also helps us to better assess what each student understands. So perhaps we have one student who answers in great detail and another student who answers using one or two words. We can assess where they may need some direction, and we may be able to assess how good their listening ability is. For instance, do they answer our question, or do they answer what they think our question is? So it really helps us to gauge our students where they are at academically. And of course, it creates that active and interactive learning environment. So rather than being preached to, the students are more engaged and more likely participating actively and going to remember what they learn. Most of the time, classes kind of have this structure. The teacher is the main person. And of course, in your lesson, you are the main person, and your student views you that way as well. But not all interactions need to go through you. In fact, you may know that another name for our group lessons is a conversation class. And so we want to build that environment when we're teaching. So rather than having this structure of a class where all interactions go through you, try to encourage that peer interaction. You can encourage this by using questions like, do you agree with the student that just spoke? Asking their opinion about what another student says. So what do you think about that? Then what can you add to what somebody else has said? And then do you have any questions for your, it should be classmates, your classmates? So you really want them to feel that peer interaction. You want to encourage them to learn from each other and not just you. The last thing we want our students to do is to not pay attention while other students are speaking. And so by creating this environment, using these types of questions, we can build that interaction and have that conversational class that our group lesson is mentioned. Another great question I forgot to mention was, is it the same in your country? So perhaps we have several countries. Sometimes we have only one country in our classroom, but perhaps we have several countries. This is a fun question to ask when several countries are represented. One of the most important ways we want to use questions is to check and build on our students' understanding. So we have this common question, do you have any questions on vocabulary, right? We've all asked that. But this is really a question we want to avoid. The reason for this is because some students don't realize they have questions. Some students are afraid to ask questions. And we want to be a lot more specific than this question. So let me give you an example. This is in our meetings, PL topic on meetings. And it's just part of the slide. We may ask the students, do you have any questions? Well, perhaps they say they don't. But by being more specific, we can focus on some new vocabulary or possible new vocabulary. So we might draw their attention to this question instead. Can you explain what get down to business means? Now we have a focus. Now, if they can't explain it, that's great. You can praise them, and that gives you something to write about in their ACR and something to praise them about. But if not, it gives you a good opportunity to expand their vocabulary. And you may want to note the new phrase in the notepad because this is a useful phrase and common phrase we use in English. Let's look at another example of one of our lesson plans. Okay, so here we have the phrasal verb look after. This is actually an example I'll use from a class I had earlier today. Of course, when I asked the student, do you have any questions? He said no. But I said, okay, can you explain what look after means? And he thought, and he thought, and he thought, and he didn't. So I was able to help him understand that it means care for, and so I added that to his vocabulary. You really want to be on the lookout for new vocabulary or the target language, any idioms that are in the lesson, and phrasal verbs. So be on the watch for that. And again, rather than asking, do you have any questions, pick the phrase, the phrasal verb, or the idiom out and say, can you explain? What does this mean? You'll definitely get a better response from the student and a better understanding on how you can build their vocabulary, what areas they understand and what areas they are struggling with. So let's just summarize some of the ways we can improve our questioning in the classroom. Rather than asking, do you have any questions? Maybe we could encourage positivity, hoping that the student has questions by saying, what questions do you have? This has been a technique that has worked well for some students because it does encourage the students to ask questions. Rather than asking, do you understand? Of course, we could ask, is that clear? But maybe a better question could be, can you give me an example of what was just explained? Can you give me a definition? How would you describe this? And then as we just talked about, do you have any questions about vocabulary? Can you explain? And then when there's an opportunity to add vocabulary to the lesson, ask them, what can you add to this vocabulary? Asking questions effectively is a great way for you to really enjoy teaching in a new way. It increases your student talk time. It will help you assess and understand where they can develop further and how you can build on their language. It'll create that positive peer environment that you want. And it'll be just a fun experience, a nice new approach perhaps. So I hope that you found these tips helpful. Feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and I'll keep you posted.